lines, but we're mostly going to be going to here. Hi, I'm Dafina Smith. I'm founder and CEO of Covet in Maine, and this is my magical person who makes everything at Covet in Maine happen. Jessica, introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jessica. I am Chief of Staff at Covet in Maine, and I'm so excited to dive in today and give you all of our tips and tricks and just kind of talk about our processes and really just help you out in the best way possible.
Yeah, so just to give an example of how this even came up as a topic. I think a lot of times we're a brand and we're a little bit more corporate than a lot of salons might be run, but I still think there's a lot of insight into sometimes even going outside of exactly what's done in the salon world and I tend to like to look at other industries as well to get best practices, insights of things that I might try and might be a good fit. And one of the things that we thought is that we kind of have a chief of staff model here. And I think we've really we've been together over a year, and we've really fine-tuned a process that really helps me step into my creative, into being a founder, but still has the executorial excellence that you need as a business to grow. And I think that a lot of that I see in the best salons, that's right. So the best stylists, the best salons, they always usually have a super manager, a business manager, sometimes even an assistant. And actually, we're going to try to talk about different ways so that no matter where you are on the journey, there's a little nugget that's relational to you, right? So some people might be like, I'm in a salon suite. This isn't relevant to me. That's not true. And we'll talk about that throughout. So just keep in your flexibility hat on while we walk through and think about some of the nuggets that can apply. We'll sometimes give you those little suggestions of tweaks to make it fit you, but just keep that hat on. And then at the end of this, we've prepared a really beautiful handout that will be the link in the bio on the replay of this. As well as we'll email the Covet Collective. So everyone with Covet in Maine will get these really great cheat sheets that we've designed just to get you started. So you want to kind of get started?
Yeah.
Okay. So, and just as a thing, if you have questions, add them in the chat. If you're on IG, we're not able to see it, but we'll kind of tiptoe towards the end and try to answer any of those questions. So first, I want to introduce Jessica. Just kind of tell everybody your background, where you came from.
Yeah. So I'm Jessica. I am originally from New York, but I moved to New Jersey. So my family's in New Jersey. I went to college at Elon University. I'm 27 years old, crazy to say. And I've been in the fashion industry for a couple of years out of college. I've been at a larger company. I've been at smaller companies. So I've kind of
what companies?
Yeah. So I've worked at Zac Posen. I've worked at Neely Lotan and Ralph Lauren before this. So I really have that experience in different types of fashion companies, but different sizes, and really just working with different corporate groups and different bosses. So I've learned to really adapt to different personalities, and it's really what comes down to is learning the person that you're working for and really just adjusting your style of work according to that person that you're supporting. So I've learned that over the years. I was really able to bring my experience in fashion over to the beauty industry because it kind of all correlates. So yeah, that's where my background lies. And I've been with Dafina for about a year, a little bit over a year. I feel like it's been way longer.
I know it has felt really long.
So yeah, my main role, I feel like, is to really just support Dafina. And I really just that's my number one. And then everything else sort of comes after that. But that's what I really try to do, and try to make her life as easy as possible and as seamless as possible. And whatever it is that she needs, I try to create processes to really bring that to life and to make it easier on her and the team. So that's what I try to do.
She's she is this really great balance of, just to sing her praises, a really great balance of someone who's really caring, but also really wants to get stuff done, and she's an advocate for getting projects off of our plate, getting them to have I think the key word you'll hear us say a lot is process. I really have learned the hard way that you can only scale and grow as much as your processes allow and support. And sometimes it feels slower, which is why a lot of times people don't want to get an assistant. Mm-hmm. And so I think that one of the keys I feel like is a lot of times people are like, well, what's the difference? Why do you call her your chief of staff versus an assistant? And do you have insight on like what you think the difference is? I definitely do.
I think that a chief of staff, an assistant is very personal to the person you're supporting. I think a chief of staff kind of takes the whole team into accountability and really tries to work on things that will affect everyone and come up with processes for everyone. And I sort of, for example, I manage our team documents. And like if we have meetings, we attach Google Documents and we have the whole team kind of collaborate. And I make sure that the team each week, they get in their notes, they get in their talking points, they have an agenda. So it's kind of a team, it's a collaboration, right? It's not just, I only work for, I do only sort of work for Dafina, but it's more than that. It's making sure that things get done around the office. It's making sure that things get shipped in time. It's a team player position, which I think is the difference.
It definitely is a difference. And I would say that like a lot of times how a chief of staff might be different from, and what does this look like more in a salon? So this might be more of someone, like if you have a lot of, I think once you get over like 3 or 4 stylists in your salon, if you're a salon owner, I definitely think this is more of like a salon manager role. But I think a lot of times, unfortunately, when you have a salon manager, you tend to think of just the things that need to get done for the business. And there's no one protective of the CEO or the head stylist and, you know, I'm trying to think of a nicer way to say, but like the fish rots from the head, right? So if the salon owner or if I'm super chaotic, super crazy, and there's not like a holistic person looking out to make sure that there's balance and that you have the full picture, there's just something different about being in a chief executive role or being an owner. And I think that with a chief of staff, you're very mindful of like, she's probably really the only one in our team who understands a holistic picture of not like what just needs to get done day to day for the business to run, but where are we going, right? And so there's a lot of times like with a salon owner, you need to put on your hat and be like 2 years out. Or sometimes you have to look at like your family and like that part, how is that going to impact how available you're going to be as a salon owner? And I think that's like what's harder to do is like you have to make sure that your chief of staff really has access, transparency to not just the day-to-day, but like the entire picture.
I think it's so important because we're still learning, and what I'm coming to learn is that I really am so protective over Dafina's schedule. So her schedule comes first, and I try to build in things around that. So it's important to know like her personal life. It's important to know, it's important just to talk a lot. Like I feel like we talk a lot and we go over the calendar, we go over things that need to be moved. We sort of maintain this communication where I don't want her to get overwhelmed. And so there needs to be space in the calendar. And that's something that we are always talking about and we're still working on because it's hard because there's so many people requesting Dafina's time. And it's hard because I'm the type of person, I know that she wants to meet with them. I know that it's a priority, but sometimes it's not as high of a priority as other things. We can push it off. So we just make sure to look at things together all the time, talk all the time to make sure we're on the same page. And I think that's really important. It's just that communication and what the priorities are. So yeah, we're just trying to, I think we work best by being super transparent with one another.
So let's kind of like talk through, like, we're going to put this in. If you're thinking about hiring chief of staff, if you're thinking about hiring an executive assistant or a virtual assistant, what's like the first step? And I think for me, I would say, for me, a lot of times I've always worked with a virtual assistant. I've had assistants in the past. I think during COVID, I had to transition. And then when I hired you, you were really the first person in a while that I had in person. And so I had to sit down and make a list of all of the things that I do. And then all of the things that I did not want to do. I literally had a list of like all of the things that I hate doing, that I'm not good at doing, or that just like suck my energy. And I think that's honestly a lot of the time the easiest way to get started, because I think a lot of times you just feel like, I don't need it. I could just, and anytime you're saying stuff like I could just, or I don't need somebody just to do, anytime you say that just or could, that's a very limiting word that really hinders a lot of growth in a lot of executives. And yes, you could just do it. Yes, I could just schedule my calendars, or I could just check my email all the time. But you don't realize how much that
takes up time.
Yeah. And it creates inefficiency. So I think it was like, once I had that list, I was very clear, I'm handing this off to her. And then I was also very clear on the things that I absolutely don't want to let go of. And I think you have to be really honest. And I think that we still sometimes have like struggle. You're like, why won't I just want to be able, I'm like, it's nothing personal to her, but I think going in early on, me kind of defining for you, like for me, it's just, I'm always going to handle bank account stuff, right? It's just one of those things. And would it be more efficient if we had, it's not that I don't trust her. It's just that there's a lot more at stake. And if something could go wrong, and I'm assuming, that could be really bad. So, and are there other things I feel like that were helpful for you coming in, knowing what the role was going to be and what it wasn't going to be? Like, what things do you think I could have done better?
There are certain things that, in terms of having access to things that, like, when we give people access to things, it's a couple of steps to get there. There's like the authentication and all of that. I think I could have come with Dafina to come up with a better process for that. So we're not kind of searching for answers all the time because we're not always together. So when people need things and Dafina's not around, sometimes it's hard to get that in a fast energy. So it's me. I think I should have asked for access to things or certain things a little bit sooner and come up with a better process for getting access. And if we run into issues, you figure out ways how to tackle that. So I think that's the only thing. But other than that, I mean, I really do feel like I have so much visibility into everything. And there's no problem with asking questions.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things that we did when we first got started is I read a book. I read a couple of books about like having a chief of staff. Michael Hyatt has a lot of really good books too on like your world-class assistant. And I think one of the things that I sat down to do, and like you need to start doing the second that you are frustrated, like the day that you know that feeling where you're just like, this is driving me crazy, right? You need to start slowing down, and things that you do a lot, you need to document. So if I'm in this, this is payroll. I have to do it every Tuesday. This is what I use. This is my login, my password. These are, for me, be able to identify like every Friday, the PTA email would drive me crazy because it was always something super last minute, like buy a teacher a gift, wear blue on Tuesday. We're going to chalk the sidewalk on Wednesday, and we need this all right now. And please give $100 for this, right? But I know, okay, every Friday that email comes in, I'm going to start putting that as like an auto forward. Just start thinking about stuff like that. Like I'm going to auto forward this to my future assistant. They're going to scan it, look for the action items, put it on the calendar, or get the Amazon account. Like there's certain things like Amazon, the nearest toy store by my house, the florist, the dry cleaners, all that stuff.
Dafina has like a cheat sheet of everything that I should know. She gave that to me right away when we started. So like all the little things about her, like her birthday, her license, I don't know, just like a lot of personal things, but things that, it's relevant because if she's not around and God forbid there's some type of emergency where I need this information, I have it it's accessible.
Well, and also what I think it does, if you have it all aligned, you'll tend to find, because now Jessica has an assistant as well. And so she's kind of seeing the challenge of like having to get ready. You have to get ready.
Yep.
And if you wait too long until you're overwhelmed, it's
Yep.
too hard to outsource. So what ends up happening is if you don't have all your ducks lined up, like I have every single birthday of people that I care about on a spreadsheet. If I see stuff, I make lists of like, oh, I like these gifts. These are good options. Birthday party suggestions. Because what ends up happening is you'll be like, oh, I need to book this. But if I needed to book it and Jessica, in order for her to do it for me, she would need to get my driver's license. She would need to get the kids' their birthday, their passports, all this stuff. And then I end up being like, oh, I don't have time to get you all of that.
Phone numbers of all her friends, of her family, just all the little things that you don't think would be important always end up coming around and you need them.
Yeah.
So it's like thinking of the little things, and having that lined up is so helpful.
Yeah.
And it's good to have that at all times.
What we're trying to stay organized here. We have our little presentation. What do you think has been the most helpful tool, like communication tools that we've used to stay like connected?
Slack is the biggest tool that we use. Dafina and I use, and we use it across the team. It's just such a simple way of having visibility into everything that's going on. You can talk, people are always on it at all times, and it's really easy to get answers. So that's the best internal tool I think that we use. And if there's anything, like Dafina and I have come up with the process that if there's anything more urgent that I need answers on, I'll text her. But for the most part, I think Slack is the most beneficial tool, because you can create channels within Slack according to the purpose. So like for a department, like a marketing department, you can have a marketing channel. You could have a customer service channel. So you can have different things different purposes for each communication channel.
Yeah.
So that's the best tool, I think.
Yeah. And I like it too, because I think, especially what I noticed for stylists, and I don't know why more stylists don't use Slack, because you have all these different things going on in a salon, and it's a free tool.
Yes.
Like, and you can work with, like we work with our different agencies, all of this stuff, but I love voice notes, because I feel like for a lot of times, like I don't even have the ability to like sit and type it out. And so you can just press record, it transcribes it for you, but they also can hear it, so they hear the context, but it lives within a dedicated channel. So later you're not like having to go back in your phone and be like, wait, where was this? And you can search the transcriptions. I think that's been really helpful. And then there's times too, like I'm good at, and this is also something to know, how are you good at communicating and giving instructions? And how are you good at receiving and processing information? I am not good at processing information auditorily. I need to look at it. But if I need to get something done, I feel like a lot of times it's helpful when I'm just like giving you the context. Yeah,
it's definitely a good balance. For me, I feel like I'm the same way too. I feel like I need to read something to really absorb it, but for example, Dafina's on the go a lot, so she needs to voice note me in the car. Like things that need to get done the way they need to, and figuring out the best communication process for that. It depends on what you need and what's going on in the certain situation that you're in. So when Dafina's in the car, she'll send me a voice note, and you just do with it what you can, but you have to just do what's best for you.
Yeah. And I think you should tinker too, to figure out. So there's a couple of other tools that we'll leave in after the replay that we'll put. So there's Otter. Before Slack had voice notes in it, I would do Otter. And I still like Otter for longer form things.
So the thing about Otter is it can join meetings too.
Yeah,
so you could attach Otter to every meeting that you have, and it transcribes the meetings. But that's another good way. We also use Loom. Or I'm sorry.
Loom.
I was thinking
Loom is good when we want to
Grain. I was thinking Grain.
Yeah, and we also use Grain. But I feel like we have a lot more corporate meetings. I think for stylists and salon owners, some of the things that you probably might like is Otter, because it transcribes it and then you can share it and you can see. I like Slack though better because it's more organized and it's all there. I think shared photo albums sometimes too, we use that as a team for creative collaborative. So if everyone's on an Apple iPhone, then you can take photos, you can put notes in it. It's almost like this private repository of like, hey, this is the client's before photo, make sure we get notes on this, or here's her her video consult, like let's make sure we get, and you can have that discussion back and forth. And then another one that we use in Google Docs, but you can also use like an Apple Notes, is our deep dive doc. Do you want to talk about it?
Yes. So this is our holy grail document. I feel like this has been the most beneficial tool for us. It's just a place where I put everything that needs to be done, or all of my questions, all action items into one place. And Dafina looks at it when she can. So it's not like me having to remind her, because when I first started, I would put reminders on her calendar multiple times a day,
and I felt like I was gonna go insane.
It just didn't work for her, which is fine.
But it worked for you because this is the thing that, and we give this example. It worked for Jessica because Jessica likes to get stuff done, and it also worked for me sometimes because there are things that like have to get done. But one day I looked up and I was like, I just felt like, and I wasn't always in the mindset of like, I'm ready to do deep work or the stuff that moves the needle work or where I need to put my thinking cap on. So I like having a place. I know I'm going, it's a document, it's not an email, or I'm going to get other stuff coming in. It just allows me to go deep. So go back.
Right. So it's just a place where I have everything that comes up during the week that I need her to review. So a lot of it is urgent, a lot of it isn't. And I sort of tend to put the things that are more urgent to the top. And when I need her responses, I make comments into the document and I tag her and I say, please review. I need your answer by end of day, end of week, whenever it is. So she gets the notification that she needs to look at it. And I could tell what's more priority, what's high priority versus low, because she'll make comments on certain things that are high priority. If it's not a priority, I know that she's read it, but she won't make comments. That's kind of like a signal to me that she'll get to it. It's just not right now. So it's just the best place. It's one place, which makes things so much easier instead of going to a million different documents or a million different drives, whatever it may be. So that's our best process, I think, to really get things done.
Yeah. And we're even gonna in the link afterward, we will have a little preview of our deep dive document and a lot of other documents. But I think this deep dive was like what's really important is to always fine tune how you work and realize like, is this working? Is this not? Because we didn't institute that until like 9 months in. So I think sometimes what happens is you're like, and I'll say that this kind of goes into understanding and communicating, and that this needs to be a really important relationship for you, that you invest in understanding your style. But I think one of the biggest things I see with a lot of people, Jessica was so good early on. So we were over communicating in the beginning. Then we hit a flow. And then almost when you see that people are really good, sometimes you stop. Just because it's good doesn't mean it's excellent. And you stop kind of touching base and refining and being like, how can we improve this? Is this really working? Is this not? And then sometimes you can be like, you slowly drift apart. And so I think it's really important to understand and know that as a CEO, your needs too will change. And I feel like your needs too of like things that you've been interested in or projects that I might have given you that I assumed you liked, but you're like, this is actually too much. So what are some tips that you think is helpful to like stay in tune with one another?
So I always like to ask Dafina in the beginning of the week, what are the priorities? What are your priorities? What should mine be? Because everything is always changing. And she reviews with me what should be the priority going into each week. And we make sure to touch base, at least have an official touch base at least once a week. So we get on the phone, we talk through the document, we talk through needs, we talk through issues, we talk through, things that can be put away. It's just creating that communication that works for you and works for your boss or your team. It's just a style that works. So I think once you learn to understand each other's personality, you go into that flow like Dafina was talking about. So
yeah, and I would say I think I think you answered that perfectly.
Yes.
We'll move on to the next one. The last thing. So, and then we have a couple questions for each other. And then I'll go and check too on Instagram. We've been on for forever on Instagram. I don't even know if my phone is still like alive. Don't delay. And it's Jessica can speak on this, but you have to start knowing to, and the reason why we wanted to do this now, August tends to be very like July, August is slower in salons. And a lot of times your tendency is to like freak out. Instead, invest in your future self. Put on your like time machine and think into December. If you start documenting these processes, if you start looking for someone now and start thinking about what are the things that like get me out of my flow, get me out of my artistry, or things that like irritate clients because they can't hear back from me, or I'm not always getting my before and afters. I would just wish I had somebody who like that was their responsibility. Start thinking about a lot of the little things that can be done. Sometimes it has nothing to do with your salon. It's just your life outside of the salon because you're getting out at 7 and it's just, there are things like Amazon orders, grocery shopping, dry cleaning that can be done and they don't even require somebody being in the same town with you. So right. I think that the thing is to start identifying when things are starting to feel too much. And you can kind of talk about how that's been for you, like now having an assistant.
Yeah. So having an assistant, it's great. But again, the hardest part is delegating tasks and taking the time to delegate because you're like, I'm so busy. I can't delegate anything. And it's like, you think you don't have the time, but once you make the time and really pass things off, you're going to be like, oh, wow, like I should have done that so much earlier. It's just like, it's such a difficult thing to start, but once you start and finish it and pass it off, your schedule becomes so much more clear and you have so much more time to get done the important, essential things that will help your business grow, right? So it's like the little things you need to get off your plate so that you can focus on big strategy, big tactical things that will help the business.
Yeah, and if I could give one little tip on that, I think I've already talked about like try to find stuff that is, I like to go for every this, do that. So it's like have this this spreadsheet of all of your friends and family's birthdays, right? So then this way you can say every Friday, go look at that spreadsheet and see if there's an upcoming birthday, and then let's get that going. Instead of you constantly, I think where a lot of people fail is that they don't get in a cadence of like on every Friday, we look at our bookkeeping or every this, so that you can just show up and not be like, what do I do next? What does she need me to do? Oh, I have to bug her. Oh, I don't want to bug her. Like that trap is really bad. And so I think if you can find certain things like a good place is like PTA emails or home association email or like salon things that have to get done. Anything that's at every, offload those super soon because that is a really great opportunity to start empowering them where they don't have to constantly be like bugging you.
Right. Yeah. Great.
So we've talked about some of our tools and resources, which will be available for download in the link later, but we're just going to go into a couple questions and then I'll check with them and then we'll wrap up. So if you have questions in the chat, put it in now. We'll check in on Instagram if anyone is even still there. I feel like we haven't even looked at that. You want to do a quick peek? Okay. Okay. So my first question for Jessica is there any questions? Any questions? Okay. So my first question for you while you're looking at this is, well, actually, you were supposed to ask questions first, but I'll ask you.
Okay. Comment as the business, thank you, Lo, as the business side of our brand. I appreciate this info. So nice.
Okay, so my question for you is now that you know me and my personality, how have you started to figure out like what is urgent and not urgent? Because I do think that this is, you have to be careful that if everything is urgent, nothing gets done. And that's like literally the picture of chaos. So what would you say?
I think, it comes down to when we touch base, when we talk about our little mic, when we talk about the priorities in the beginning of the week. So that's something that we're actually trying to refine because we went through a time where we weren't really discussing the priorities as much, but we now talk about it one-on-one and we talk about it in our meetings. So that's when I get a sense of the priorities. The deep dive doc is when I get a sense as well. So that's goes back to knowing her style. So I know that works for her, and I know how she acts when things aren't urgent versus when they are. So again, it takes time to really understand one another and get on the same page. It doesn't happen overnight. It's just a constant communication thing. Like the more you communicate, I think the better. And then you can kind of
honestly, like I think it's like giving people
feedback.
like, I like coffee this way. I don't like, this is what seat I like to sit on. I'm bougie about travel. I'm not fancy. One time I remember I went to Europe. I remember you booked the car service through. So she booked, it was amazing. So this was like one of like probably the first trips. And I went to Europe.
Oh yes.
And it was amazing. And she booked a car, and it was like this brand new BMW, and it was like taking us everywhere. And I was like, okay, thanks for dropping us off. Like, we're good now. And he's like, no, I'm going to be with you all day. And I was like, no, like, I'm not, like, there's certain things I'm super scrappy on. I was like, no, I can just take like a taxi or an Uber, like, but there are certain things I do want car service for. So it's like, it sounds petty, but you really have to like get granular.
Yes. And I sort of know now, because if Dafina's out late, for example, at a dinner in New York, she lives in Connecticut, right? So I know if she's out until 10 p.m. at dinner that she doesn't want to take the train home. I mean, she could, sometimes she does.
Yeah.
It's more so just checking in and being like, would you like a car service tonight? I'm assuming you do because it's 10 p.m. and you want to get home, without having to deal with the trains. And she'll be like, yes, thank you for thinking about it. So I think with that, I think anticipating needs also is something that is really, really important. And I try to really be on top of that and look at things ahead of time and try to be ahead of her so that her life is easier.
Yeah. Right. So you want to ask any questions from me?
Yes. What do you think are the most essential things that I do that have helped you?
Okay. So I would say the most essential thing that you've done is help. I delegate a lot of stuff to lots of different types of people. So we have agencies, we have other businesses, we have partners, we have our stylist, and you are a really good, like, which is what a true chief of staff is like, hey, she's getting this to you. What more information are you going to need before you need to get started? That back and forth, so people aren't constantly coming to me, and you're staying on top of people for the things that I've assigned them. So I'm not constantly in like the micromanager hat, and that there's agendas when we get to meetings, and that we have clear deliverables, and we have action items, and that the biggest thing is like all of the 9011 projects that we're working on, if they're not in our calendar, they're not going to get done. And I think like calendar management in alignment with delegation and prioritization is truly like the biggest thing that you do. And it's so hard to get right, because sometimes things that we've planned, something else urgent comes up, and then you have to realign. It's like that constant thing.
And it goes back to communication, right? So like, I'll go to her and I'll be like, do you want to remove this? Do you want to keep this? And we have that constant line of communication. So I know what's the priority.
Yeah.
Because it can be tough because there's so much going on. But once you go back to your top 3 strategies, your top priorities of the quarter, of the year, whatever it may be, that's when things kind of make sense, when you focus in on what's important.
Yeah. And I think and we'll kind of end on this since there's no questions, but I think that one thing that to make this go, because I was very hesitant to work with assistants earlier in my career, but then I started to really see the value of when you are creative. I am a creative entrepreneur. I'm a visionary. My mind is like always, I have so many beautiful things in my mind of possibilities. It doesn't matter if they don't get executed on, if there's not a process for it, it's worthless. Your artistry is the same way. So what gets scheduled, your consultations, your before and afters, the follow-up with clientele, the ordering of supplies, all of that that's what what powers the passion. And when you get bogged down in all the things that aren't there, it really like it slows you down. But I think the other thing that's really important to do though is on the flip side, when you bring in an assistant, you bring in a manager, you're still an artist. And so you still have to explain that you need space and that you're not always in a place where everything is getting done. And I think that's like for people who work with artists or creatives is making sure that just because they're fully open, that you don't fully book them, and learning how to give some buffers and space and be like, wow, they have like, they're educating this week and then they're flying there, they're coming back on vacation. I'm going to build in a little bit of a buffer for them. They may not tell me that they need it, but I, over time, can observe like they're going to need that day. And it's sometimes you even have to push back. I feel like even for me, I'll be like, oh my God, I was so overscheduled. And then I'll keep doing it again because we're workhorses.
Yeah.
We will work ourselves. And it's really your job to be like, not your job, but I think when we work best, is when you're like, that's great, but you're repeating the same cycle. So that's what's going to get removed or what can't we do?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's why I have her at the end of each week be like, please review the calendar. It's a lot. So please tell me if it's too much. And it might be it ends up, it can be too much, but we learn from that and we change it moving forward. So yeah, allowing those buffer times, like lunch breaks are important. Like breaks are important. Like Dafina needs time to actually like create an idea in her mind and work on those ideas as opposed to being in meetings all day.
Yeah.
So, 15 minutes between each meeting, try not to have more than 4 Zoom meetings on the calendar.
Yeah.
Like that's something that we've kind of created as a process. We try not to have meetings on Fridays. Like it's just like little things that work for Dafina that I try to like keep in place each week.
Yeah. So I hope that this was helpful.
Oops, sorry. Should I check the Instagram?
Yeah, we'll check Insta one more time. But as I said, we'll have all these resources, and we'll do this again if it's helpful. And if not, we'll talk about something else. Were there any questions?
There are no questions.
Okay.
As of now, let me keep scrolling.
Okay. So
No.
bye, you guys. Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.